Our next speaker is Captain Sid Preskitt. He has been actively involved in Agenda 21 research for the past 15 years. He's appeared before Congress, testifying to the effects of Agenda 21 on our fisheries here in Florida, and he's here to tell you about it.
Thank you very much for having me here today, and I'm really honored to be here in the company of people like Dr. Michael Kaufman and the others. And I really want to thank Rita and Mike and the others, Karen Schoen, that have knocked themselves out to put on these meetings to get information out to people. We're in an epic struggle against evil, and that's what it is. We're in a struggle for the survivability of this country, and I think it's a new beginning right now. So my presentation here, the first of it, goes into Agenda 21. I'm going to skip through that pretty fast because it's already been pretty well covered. I really want to try to connect some dots with you, what's going on, people's comments that have made in the past, and how it relates to the fishing industry in the United States. I'm not talking about in state waters in Florida here primarily. I'm talking about in the federal waters, in the oceans, Gulf of Mexico, and the Pacific. The nation expects to be ignorant and free in a state of civilization. It expects what never was and never will be. That statement was made by Thomas Jefferson, and it is absolutely true. Knowledge is power. And thank goodness there's people like you here today that are interested in gaining the knowledge, and it will give you the power that's going to be necessary to do something about this. Agenda 21, we've already covered that. I want to skip down to the bottom here, conspiracy theory. That we've got to get past pretty quickly. You're going to be armed with knowledge, the facts that you can confront this with. And don't be shy about talking about it anymore. This is official government policy. You know, if anybody wants to try to poo-poo this with you, it's not their lack of knowledge that makes them a nut. Or makes you a nut, I'm sorry. Maybe I'm a nut. Agenda 21, you know, I don't know. Go get a copy of it. Take it into your city council, county council meetings, your state rep, your congressional offices. Why don't they have a copy of this? It's what the government is being run by today. That's a good question. I've got some friends that got a copy a couple months ago, $25. I think you go on the UN website and look for it. I don't think it's easily obtainable, but you can get it. It's online. I'm going to give you a link here in a minute. You can go right on the federal government website and read it. Local Agenda 21 Planning Guide published by ICLEI. This is in all of your planning departments. That's what all of their planning is coming out of. Now we're going backwards. The realities of life on our planet dictate that continued economic development as we know it cannot be sustained. This is a key thing to read the statements that they made, connect the dots as to what's gone on the past 20 years that's got us into the economic situation that we're in right now. Here's a website right here. It's fedcenter.gov. You go on there, in the search box right up there, enter Agenda 21. It'll take you to this web page. And right there is the link. You click on this link in blue right there. It'll take you to the Agenda 21 document. Thank you, federal government. Agenda 21, of course, is a comprehensive plan of action to be taken locally, nationally, by governments and major groups in every area of which human impacts on the environment. And of course, this will include fishing. This is a key statement by Mr. Maurice Strong, who was the chair of the UN Earth Summit in 1992. I think you may have seen this. I came in late. Current lifestyles and consumption patterns of the affluent middle class involving high meat intake, use of fossil fuels, appliances, home, workplace air conditioning, suburban housing are not sustainable. Of course, he talks about giving the United Nations more power. So pretty much everything that made the United States the greatest country on the planet Earth is not sustainable. This right here is one of the most profound statements I've ever read. Again, by Maurice Strong, and we're connecting dots here. This was back in 1992 when he said this: "Isn't it the only hope for the planet, because we're not sustainable, for the industrialized countries to collapse? Isn't it our responsibility to bring that about?" Well, when you look, yeah, that's an astounding statement, isn't it, by a high UN official. When you look at the effects of the Agenda 21 policies that have been implemented since 1993, 1994, by every federal agency down into your local, county, and city levels, after almost 20 years of this, what is our current economic state in the United States today?
Bankruptcy.
I would say Mr. Strong should be pretty happy in fulfilling his responsibility to bring about the collapse of the industrialized countries. Very effective. This was a statement by, remember Paul Bergala, one of Clinton's so-called advisors, stroke of the pen, law of the land, kind of cool, huh? Speaking to the executive orders. Are American fisheries regulated by Agenda 21? In 1976, Congress passed the Magnuson-Stevenson Fishery Management Act. That created the 8 regional fishery management councils around the coastal states, and the Southeast are managed by the South Atlantic Management Council. Over in the Gulf, it's the Gulf Council. These regulate all fisheries in federal waters. This legislation was implemented to begin with to curtail the incursions from foreign fishing fleets into American waters, and it's been very effective in doing that. The problem is that over the years, starting in 1996, and you look at the timelines here, Earth Summit in 92, the Executive Order of Clinton in 94, in 1996, the Sustainable Fishery Act was enacted, and what that did, that legislation was written by the environmental groups. I had a list of 100 of them that were congratulating themselves on, in effect, writing this Sustainable Fishing Act legislation. And what it did was to reconfigure the Magnuson-Stevenson Fishery Management Act to conform to Chapter 17, which is Oceans and Fisheries, and Agenda 21. So, another one in 1996, President Clinton transmitted the Migratory Fish Stocks Agreement, which is UNCLOS, that's the United Nations Convention on Law of the Sea Treaty. It's a protocol based on UN Agenda 21 to the Senate Foreign Relations Committee for ratification. Secretary of State Warren Christopher, however, declared that no federal legislation was required to ratify it. Well, that's what they said in the President's Council on Sustainable Development. Ron Brown told them that most of Agenda 21 policies could be implemented through existing federal statutes and legislations and other things. Agenda 21, Chapter 17, Oceans and Fisheries, 17.21, a precautionary approach is necessary and requires adoption of precautionary measures. How many people in here understand the precautionary principle? That's good. Quite a few of you do.
We had a session on that one.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry I missed that. Over on the East Coast, from North Carolina to Key West, we're well into the second year of a total closure on red snapper fishing. 2008, they came out with a stock assessment that said that species was fished to the point of near extinction. That's despite the fact that they've been on a rebuilding program since 1992, and due to the hand of Mother Nature and the commercial industry being not on those species very much, there's a historical abundance of red snapper over there right now. We had 2 divers off the coast of Daytona that were literally attacked, had to get out of the water last week because there were so many red snapper. They're eating everything up. You jump in the water and you're food. So, anyway, there's a paper written by University of Florida scientist Dr. William Kinney that points to one of the primary reasons for that closure is the use of the precautionary principle. Of course, as the ones of you that have been here this morning probably know, that's item 15 of the Rio Declaration out of Agenda 21. The objectives of essential fish habitat are parallel to the objectives of the United Nations Convention on Biological Diversity, a binding international agreement that went into force in 1993. Of course, that binding international agreement was the one that the United States Senate refused to ratify, as Dr. Kaufman told you about in his presentation earlier, although in official publications of the South Atlantic Fishery Management Council, we're told that it's a binding international agreement and that all of our fishery management programs based on essential fish habitat now conform to it. In requiring the fishery management councils, along with the National Marine Fisheries Service, to describe and identify the essential fish habitat, the Magnuson-Stevenson Act closely parallels the requirements of international forums. It's more on the precautionary approach. President's Council on Sustainable Development, Recommendation 6, Fisheries. Of course, we have the 96 Sustainable Fishing Act passed. The Magnuson-Stevenson Act incorporated the Agenda 21 principles. In 1998, in the South Atlantic, they started reductions in overcapitalization in the red snapper fishery. This is right out of Agenda 21. The South Atlantic Council passed an amendment that eliminated 75% of the permit holders in the southeastern region out of that fishery. And I was one of the permit holders that was eliminated, and I was involved in the fishing industry back then, but I didn't really have any interest in fishing for red snapper. I was doing other things, but the permits were available, so I had one from the day that they began issuing it. I didn't have the necessary landings that they come along and said that you had to have in one of 3 past years to renew permits as per this new amendment. So I was one of the ones that was cut out of the fishery back in 1998. 75% of the permit holders gone. Just what I went over here, the red snapper fishery is closed. Primary reason is the precautionary principle. Dr. Jane Lipchenko, I want to talk about her for just a minute. She was the vice chair of Environmental Defense Fund. She is now, thanks to President Obama, she is the director of NOAA and the National Marine Fisheries Service. She's the one that's running the show, right out of EDF. If you look at the President's Council on Sustainable Development in Agenda 21, it talks about setting up an allocation system. Dr. Lipchenko has made it her priority, or NOAA's top priority right now, to implement an allocation system in all American fisheries. It's called catch shares. And the Gulf of Mexico over here implemented it a couple of years ago on red snapper. It's devastating your commercial fisheries. Most of your fishermen do not qualify. It's a complicated system I won't get into because it's very technical. But your average fisherman will not qualify to continue on in a catch share program because they don't receive enough allocation of the quota to continue. So they're just tying their boats to the dock, selling them for what they can get, and leaving. It's devastated the fisheries up in Gloucester, New Bedford. You have 80% of your fishing fleet up there tied to the dock because they don't have enough allocation to fish on. And this is despite abundant marine resources. The marine protected areas, you have the maps of the Wildlands Project. It doesn't stop at the shoreline because they have gone off into the oceans and they're designated some of the most highly productive areas of the ocean bottom. They know where these areas are due to data that's been collected for the past 20 years provided by your commercial fishermen as to where they've been fishing in the oceans. So now they're marking off, closing these areas as marine protected areas. There's a publication by the National Resource Council that I found in there that this reference here, and it says, quote, MPAs, marine protected areas, have been identified as an important mechanism to attain the objectives of the CBD. That's Convention on Biological Diversity, again, the treaty that was not ratified. Your commercial industry has been reduced since the mid-90s to now by over 70%. Imports of seafood consumed in the United States right now are at 86%. 86% of the seafood consumed in this country is imported. And the $8 billion trade deficit when I did this is now $10.5 billion. That's $10.5 billion just in seafood that could be in our economy and is not. It's in foreign countries' economies, places like Vietnam and China. Of course, this is the Executive Order 13158, Bill Clinton, May 26, 2000. Each federal agency should take appropriate actions to develop a national system of marine protected areas. That's almost verbatim right out of the Convention on Biological Diversity. This paper right here is back in June of 2011 by Mr. Jia Zhu King at a event up in New York City, the National Press Club. And here's his statement: the world's oceans are too heavily exploited and too little managed. The dire strait of many fisheries is hard evidence. Many would like to see forceful actions agreed to at Rio to accelerate implementation of Chapter 17 of Agenda 21 on protection of the oceans. This is long overdue. Dr. Ray Hilborn, professor of aquatic and fishery science at the University of Washington, said that the idea of 70% of the world's fish stocks are overfished or collapsing, and the rate of overfishing is accelerating, and the assumptions fueling the standard, somebody pronounce that for me. Thank you. Scenarios painted by the gloom and doom proponents are simply untrue. So you read in the papers all the time about these articles about how the world's oceans are overfished, 90% of the big fish have been caught, it's gloom and doom. It's absolutely not true. It's pure and simple propaganda. Dr. Steve Murkowski retired as the chief scientist for NOAA last year. Once he was out of the agency, made this statement that the era of overfishing has ended for the first time in written fishing history, which goes back to 1900. This signals the coming of increasingly healthy stocks and better days for fishermen. Sorry to tell you, Mr. Zhu King, or whatever his name is, you're wrong. A recent study published in Science magazine inaccurately projected that all seafood and fish species would collapse by 2048. NOAA scientists dispute this, saying it is, quote, is wrong, and that it, quote, utterly misrepresents the true status of regulated fisheries throughout the world, and particularly the United States. The precautionary principle, again, was this talked about with in relationship to the Law of the Sea Treaty?
No.
Well, this is extremely important. Lawrence Kogan is an international law attorney in New York City. He called me last month in response to an article that's on our website for our fishing organization, and he really enlightened me as one of the big threats of the Law of the Sea Treaty, and it's an incorporation of this precaution, the European version of precaution, where there's no scientific evidence necessary to take action on any perceived problem. Y'all remember a few years ago in the Pacific, there was a lawsuit brought on the United States Navy trying to prevent the use of sonar, saying it was harming the marine mammals, the whales and dolphins. That lawsuit was brought by the NRDC, that's the National Resource Defense Council, of whom Mr. John Bryson was a founder. I'll get to him in a minute. But that lawsuit tried to stop the use of sonar based on the use of the precautionary principle. They had no evidence whatsoever that there was any harm to any marine mammals. Subsequently, the lawsuit was dismissed. They went on and filed another lawsuit against the Pentagon trying to stop the construction of ICBM missile silos in Alaska, saying it was harming the environment. That lawsuit was thrown out also. But what Mr. Kogan explained to me, if the Law of the Sea Treaty is acceded to or ratified by the United States, it will incorporate that European version of precaution into United States law, and lawsuits such as these two against our military capability could very well succeed in the future. The Law of the Sea Treaty must never be ratified by this country.
But doesn't Obama executive order make it mandatory as an end run?
No,
Of course it's an end run going on through the Ocean Council and stuff like that,
That
but
was July 19th, and the Senate didn't act by the August 19th, and so that is good, right?
no.
He's talking about regulations, regulatory agencies.
Say that again?
He's talking about regulations passed by regulatory agencies, rulemaking.
Mm-hmm. Well, you're 100% right. Yeah, everything they're doing right there is an end run around Congress right now. And as far as it incorporating this precautionary principle, they've already done it in fisheries. You know, but when it goes forward, when other lawsuits are filed in the future about entities like the NRDC, will it succeed or not? I don't know. We can't have that. It's got to be stopped. Whether it's ratified, acceded to, or done by an end run on Congress, you can't have environmental groups with dubious motives curtailing the military capability of this country.
How do we stop it?
That's a good question.
Fight in court.
We're going to get to a point here pretty soon where the rubber's going to meet the road on how to stop some of this stuff.
We can't. The Senate had 30 days, and the 30 days ran out the 19th of August. So it's a done deal.
Well, we'll see what'll happen then. I want to speak just for a quick minute here about ICLEI. How much of an understanding do you have about ICLEI, this ICLEI organization? Not very much. ICLEI, the International Council on Local Environmental Initiatives, this is how they're implementing Agenda 21 at the local level. This organization was created out of the United Nations, and their sole purpose is to implement Agenda 21, the Kyoto Protocols, and the Convention on Biological Diversity locally. There's 42 cities and counties that are members of ICLEI in Florida. I live in Volusia County. Volusia County is a member, and right now, as per the ICLEI Charter, which also specifies that the local governments adopt the Earth Charter principles into local government decisions. I wrote a letter to Governor Scott that I have right here. This is a cover letter and the document that went to him in February. Your local governments are political subdivisions of the state, and as per the Florida Constitution, as a political subdivision of the state, you're treated the same way as the state. And the United States Constitution, Article 1, Section 10, specifically prohibits states from engaging in international affiliations. But that's exactly what they're doing as per ICLEI. ICLEI says they represent local governments at the international level at the United Nations. There was never even a reply to this from Governor Scott back in February. I ran into one of his top aides in Orlando at the CPAC convention last week, and I gave it to him again. So it's been put into his hands at least twice, and probably no telling how many people have actually sent this letter to him over the time. So he knows about it. They're not doing anything about it. This is a letter again from the same UN official. ICLEI is trying to distance themselves from being a part of the UN, and of course this UN official says right here at the outset, let me thank my host, ICLEI, International Council for Local Environmental Initiatives. You're a longtime partner of the United Nations going back to Rio in 1992. Of course, here's their mission. This is right on their website. It's icle.org if you want to take a look at it. Some of this has been scrubbed recently because there's a lot of people onto them. And of course, their goals are Agenda 21, the Rio Conventions, UN Convention on Biological Diversity, and the Kyoto Protocols. Of course, there's Article 1, Section 10 of the Constitution. How much money is going to the UN from the United States? July 2006, Office of Management and Budget report. Fiscal year 2009, a total of $6.3 billion. 2006, back in 2006, it was $5.3 billion. Don't have any reports more recent than that right now. They're probably still trying to count it all up. This is coming out of every federal agency. Practically every federal agency is giving money for various things to the United Nations. course, there was $100 million donated to the United Nations recently by Obama. Don't ask me how he does that. I thought it was Congress's duty to do that type of thing. HUD, $170 million in grants available. This is for local governments to implement Agenda 21 issues. $526 million from DOT, USDA, $100 million in grants to 4 counties in Florida. Dr. Kaufman talked about conservation easements as a mechanism for implementing the Wildlands Project. Recently, the USDA has made available $100 million to 4 counties in South Florida to buy conservation easements along the Kissimmee River. Ronald Reagan made this comment. He said, "We have a rendezvous with destiny. We will preserve for our children this, the last best hope of man on earth, or we will sentence them to take the first step into 1,000 years of darkness. If we fail, at least let our children and our children's children say of us, we justified our brief moment here. We did all that we could be done. Now let's go out and let's get to work. Let's do something about it." Thank you.